vengeance!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there. I want you to be perfect.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweater working for the man, alright. Well, hey. Well, I wanna be a firefighter. Cool-headed when the heat is on, yeah. Save my baby from the burning building. Take all the work, sleepless on, alright. Well,
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you. He rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Evening, race fans. Welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to the Drafting the Circuits radio program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we break down this past weekend in racing and what a weekend it was. Before we get into that, let me introduce you to the panel. With me, as always, Mr. Gray Warren from Richard Childress Racing, Richard Youden from Eau Rouge Engineering, and Seth Eggert from Motorsports Tribune. Gentlemen, how is everybody tonight?
Doing good.
Great.
Yeah, very good, thank you.
All right, great to have you here. Love talking to you guys. It's the highlight of my week, like I like to say. So NASCAR Ford Championship weekend down there in Miami at Homestead, we crowned 3 champions. Brett Moffitt, Tyler Reddick, and Joey Logano can all call themselves NASCAR champions now. Some of these were upset wins. Joey Logano was certainly what you might call an upset win. You had the big 3, Kyle, Kevin, and Martin. The guys, combined to win the most races this year. Joey Logano going in there had a good run. You could say he stole the thing or he won the thing fair and square. But, at the end of the day, Joey Logano is a NASCAR champion. He's 10 years in the making. Here's a kid that was thrust into the spotlight at a young age. He was replacing Tony Stewart at Joe Gibbs Racing as a rookie, which are big shoes to fill. And this is a culmination of a long process and a really great career he's had so far, and he's got many good years ahead of him. Now there are folks that are unhappy with the chased format, and the fact that the air quotes underdog won, but NASCAR wanted this playoff system to mirror stick and ball sports, where it comes down to the championship game, whether it be the, last game of the Final Four or the Super Bowl, instead it's Ford Championship weekend. And, just like, the 1983 North Carolina Wolfpack or the 2007 New York Giants, Joey Logano pulled off an upset in the big game, which makes him a champion and a legitimate champion at that. So now, Gray, you paid close attention to the race here, and you've watched Joey Logano drive and mature. So what are some of your thoughts on Joey Logano, reaching this moment in his career, and let's talk about how he got it done too.
Well, Joey Logano is 28 years old, and he's a veteran. He's been at this a long time now. He was kind of thrust into the spotlight, and we talk about this, seems like every week with these young drivers that we have now. Is it too early for them to move up the cup? We always ask that question and we debate that. We've debated it with, Suarez and Eric Jones and some of the other guys coming up, and then this current crop of guys coming up in the Xfinity ranks now. Joey Logano was in that position, when he moved up, and a lot of people thought that, maybe he got brought up a little bit too fast. He was thrown in the fire a little bit too quick. And, of course, there's always two sides to every story. Some guys feel that, yes, sometimes guys could use an extra year of seasoning in the Xfinity series, but then there's another school of thought that says throw them right in the fire and let sink or swim, let them learn on the fly. And Joey Logano was one of those that kind of learned on the fly, and it was rough sledding over at Joe Gibbs. Some he wasn't spectacular. He got some wins, but I think was put in that situation and he had to learn. But he did learn. He did gain that experience. And when he was released at Joe Gibbs, he found a home at Penske, and he's done well there. He's claimed a championship. He's been a championship runner-up. He's a Daytona 500 champion. So yeah, his career's on the rise, and we forget that he's been around so long. We forget he's just 28 years old. Remarkable. And I think he's coming into his own, and he's going to be part of that crop. He's closer in age to the Ryan Blaney's and the Chase Elliott's and the Kyle Larson's. So he's going to be part of that group that's going to carry the sport forward.
And on top of that, his championship, it's just the 9th Drivers' Championship for Ford, which that stat alone is kind of mind-boggling with how many years Ford has been in the sport. The only other drivers that he's joining, and it's a list of either Hall of Famers or future Hall of Famers: Ned Jarrett, David Pearson, Bill Elliott, Alan Kulwicki, Dale Jarrett, and then you have Kenseth and Kurt Busch. The last time Ford won a manufacturer's title was 2002. They won the manufacturer's title for the first time in 16 years. And it's the first time they won both the Drivers' Championship and the owner's title since 1999.
Yeah. And I tell you, too, and part of that, too, you can look back over that history. Ford's been outnumbered in teams during a lot of those years. There was far more Chevrolets in the starting field than there was other makes. And obviously, there's strength in numbers, and that's kind of how that kind of went down. The tables have been turned a little bit with Ford's current resurgence in that, they picked up powerhouse team like Stewart-Haas. Now they have Penske. And, of course, most of the win, all their wins have come from basically that. And you still have the Roush teams involved in it, too. But picking up a powerhouse team like Stewart-Haas really raised the bar and has helped Ford overcome that deficit. So, yeah, that's a big thing they wanted to do. I know I'd spoken with Doug Yates a while back, and, that was one thing that they were really, that was one of the focal points of the Ford teams this year was to capture that manufacturer's championship.
And they won 19 races combined between Stewart-Haas Racing, Team Penske, and Stewart-Haas alone won 12 races, one-third of the season. Right,
that's true. Kevin Harvick with 8. I think you had with Almirola and Kurt Busch with 1 apiece.
And Boyer with 2.
And Boyer with 2, that's correct. And then you had, that's pretty strong. And then you had Penske with 6?
7.
7, let's see. Keselowski with
3.
Keselowski with 3 and Logano with 3.
And Blaney with 1 at the Roval.
And Blaney with 1, yeah. I forgot Blaney. That is correct. Blaney got the Roval at Charlotte. So, yeah. So, strong showing from Ford this year, and, of course, there goes your conspiracy. All your crazy conspiracy theories that, the people, thought that NASCAR was in cahoots with Toyota and they were in cahoots with Chevrolet and whatnot. But, yeah, it just goes to show you that the pendulum swings in our sport. And right now, Ford's holding the upper hand because I think they have the stronger teams. And right now, and that helps. That helps a lot when you've got that driver lineup that they've got. It's hard to beat. And plus, with the performance that they're being able to turn out with Roush Yates engines, and the chassis that are coming out of Penske and Stewart-Haas.
And speaking of that real quick, this is the first year that all 4 of the championship 4 drivers finished 1, 2, 3, 4, and just the sheer speed Logano had, especially at the end of the race, the way he threw it into the corner to pass Truex. Team Penske really found something, and it's going to be interesting to see if they're able to hold on to it as they switch from the Fusion to the Mustang next year.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
They did gain strength as the latter part of the year. Keselowski got hot there right just before the regular season ended, and got 3 wins in a row. And then of course you had Logano picked up. Logano picked up a win at Talladega earlier in the year, and then had that controversial race at Martinsville that kind of set him up for his run to the championship and got them in position to transfer and kind of be set before the rest of the field was set to go to Miami.
Yeah, and let's just mention for a second just the fabulous year that the Penske organization has had. I mean, if you look over this past year, they had Will Power swept the month of May with the Indy Grand Prix and then taken the Indy 500. Brad Keselowski won the Brickyard 400 and the Southern and the Southern 500, and then Joey Logano brings the title home for the team. And somewhere in the mix there, they picked up their 500th. Overall win as an organization. So you just can't say enough about the Penske organization and how well prepared they are and how they show up to win.
33 championships worldwide, and they're going for a 34th this weekend with the Australian Supercars. So they could finish the year off with a bang down under.
And they're leading that championship by, I believe, 14 points right now.
Yeah, so it could be a tremendous year for Team Penske. But we all talk about Roger and his organization, and it's how strong they are, the depth they have, and just basically class personified, just a class act, well-run organization. You can't just professional in every way, and hats off to Penske. They did a great job in winning that championship.
They certainly did. So let's talk about how the race went down a little bit, guys. So there were, because it was back and forth for a while. Truex looked to have it won for a while. Harvick was strong at times. Kyle Busch led a number of times. Joey was strong on and off all day, particularly on the short run. So one of you gentlemen would like to go ahead and just break down the race.
It came down. I mean, you had your top 4 cars running in or near the top 5 all day long. Harvick turned out. It looked like Harvick, and this is in daylight before twilight came on. Harvick definitely had the best car at times. He won the first stage, and then along comes Larson. And Larson, he was one of the guys that everybody had pegged that was the one outside the top the championship 4 that could win the race. And you made that high line work for him, and he ended up beating Kevin Harvick to the line and winning the second stage. And at times looked like he could drive away from the field. But different strategies for different cars. Harvick's car would come to life after about 7 or 8 laps on new tires, and then he could assert himself. Joey Logano's car was good all night on the get-go, and he could run about he could really hold off everybody for about 25 laps. 20 to 25 laps, he had the strongest car. Truex had a late run car. His car would come in when the other cars would come back to him, and he could assert his car. Kyle Busch's car was kind of off the pace all night. He didn't lead. I think he did lead a portion there at one time during when some guys were short pitting and whatnot. He stayed on the track as long as he could. In fact, he benefited from that late caution. He stayed on the track and led about 21 or some laps during that portion. But that was the only strategy they had. They had to try to make that work because they had fallen too far behind the leaders to make coming in and getting new tires work before everybody else. So they kind of had to play their strategy, their hand. They kind of had to play the hand they were dealt, and that was staying out. And then, of course, the late caution came out when the 19 and the 2 got together and kind of reset the field. And, of course, 18 has a really good pit stop and comes out with the lead, but obviously he couldn't hold it. He faded back to about fifth spot. I forgot to tell you, in the middle there, sometime, Larson had his trouble getting into the wall and cutting down a right rear tire, and it sort of ended his night, and then kind of left it up to the championship four to decide it. Truex had positioned himself in second place, but it just, with the way the last caution fell and on the restart, you kind of looked at Joey Logano how the race had gone all night long. He could fire off on the short run, and you knew he could hold that speed for about 20 laps, and there was about 15 laps to go for the end. Right after the restart, he drove it down into turn one and blew past Truex and was able to drive away and win the championship.
Yeah, his car was incredibly strong on that restart there. Yeah, so
yeah, new tires. He was like that all night long. Yep. Now, Richard, you're being quiet over there, so I like I'd like you to chime in a little bit on here. I know you worked in NASCAR for a time, and so I mean, what are your thoughts on Joey Logano and his championship and the chase format overall?
I mean, you've got to give the guy credit. He's gone in there and pretty much. I mean, we were to a certain extent guilty of it a little bit ourselves on the show last week. Nobody really gave him a chance apart from I think Seth, you picked.
Yes, I did.
Well, yeah, okay. There goes my theory. But no, in general, it was what was the phrase? The big three and me sort of thing. And fair play to the guy. He's gone about his business away from all the limelight, away from all the drama. There was the whole thing about him moving Truex at Martinsville. But hey, if he hadn't done that, in a way, that was the move that won him the championship. More so, because he, had a very capable car, and to a certain extent, when you decide on your setup for a race, especially in the Cup Series, you look at it and you say, well, do we go for a short run car or do we go for a long run car? Very rarely do you have a car that is dominant in both scenarios. And the Furniture Row guys and Truex, they went for a long run car, and I'm sure that the guys at Penske said, well, hey, look, let's take a gamble. They probably knew they weren't fastest on outright pace. So let's take a gamble. There's going to be a caution in the last 20, 25 laps or so. We're just going to throw that dice. We've got to try and get there. If we can be in a position, in the top five with 25, and there's a caution with 25 to go, it's theirs to win. So, and that's exactly what happened. So, you've got to give them a huge amount of credit for that. And, congratulations to them.
And just real quick, this is the 5th year of this format, the elimination playoff format. We have not had a repeat winner in this specific format. Yes, Jimmy Johnson won his 7th title, but that was his first championship in this playoff format with the eliminations. So for people who weren't giving him credit, this format seems more conducive to first-time champions, regardless if there's already a champion in the Final Four.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I mean,
yes, it has. Yep.
Is it? Yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, you can only get going into the final race 4 possible winners. So I guess that takes out the other 36 guys in the field, doesn't it? So you are limiting the number of chances of a repeat winner. But I think it just comes back down to execution on the night, doesn't it? I mean, they've got to go for it, haven't they? Really, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, and again, back to talking about the format. The upset victories are what sports lore is all about. It's like people talk about the upset victories for years longer than they'll talk about Lewis Hamilton winning his title, in clinching with a couple races yet to go. So I think NASCAR's made some good steps for this. A lot of folks don't like it. I'm not sure that they're bringing on board new fans with it, but I applaud them for sticking with it and giving it a try. I myself enjoy it. I it took me a while to warm up to it, but I enjoy the format. How about you, Gray? You've been watching. Do you prefer straight up points racing, or are you a little more sold on the new format this day and age?
I'm a purist to a point. I like the old accumulative setup where you crowned your champion. I just think there's so many things that can go wrong. That can happen. You can have a guy that can dominate the entire season and win the lion's share races and get knocked out on a technicality in one race in one of these segments and not get and not realize the championship. But like you said in the opening, it's NASCAR wanted to kind of bring our sport into more line with the stick and ball sports and have a playoff structure to create interest. And they did this because in under the old way, sometimes the championship could be decided 2 races prior to the final race. Some years it still went down to the final race, but you never knew how it was going to come. This format ensures that it will come down to a final race. And I think NASCAR changed, and I'll give them credit for this. They could have left it alone and appeased the purist in the sport and still lost viewership because people would have gotten tired of it and would have not, and the interest would have gone away. I think they tried to do what they wanted to create interest in it and kind of spice it up some because even before the chase came, people were losing a little bit of interest in how the championship went down. So. Yeah, it's a hard thing to say. You can talk to 100 different people, and you'll get you'll get a 50-50 split on whether people like it or don't. But it's created some interesting things over the years. I think NASCAR's issues that we've talked about a lot are far more deeper than just the chase, whether people like it or not. There's more going on than just that. But I think if you really like racing, you're going to continue to watch. And if you like drama, and you got it this weekend because you did, up until the last restart, you did not know who was going to come away with the championship. And really, you really didn't get a feeling of who was going to win it until right there with about 5 laps to go. And Joey Logano had pulled out to a 1.5 lead over second place, that you felt somewhat secure that Logano was probably going to secure the championship. So yeah, I think it did what they wanted it to do. It created drama right down to the end.
Yeah, we'll just have to see what the next steps are for NASCAR. I know there's, they had a press conference the other day about the future state of the series. They're looking at bringing the some of the tracks under the NASCAR banner there. The ISC, is it the ISC tracks or the SMI tracks? ISC. They're bringing the ISC tracks to NASCAR, but they've also talked about cross promoting with the short tracks. They acquired ARCA recently. They've talked about very briefly about cross promoting with IndyCar. So we'll just have to see what the future brings. But let's talk about real quick. Couple guys. Could be their last cup race or their last full-time cup race anyway. End of the line for Jamie McMurray, Allmendinger. They're saying this is probably Kens's last race. So a couple guys out the door that have had pretty good careers, huh, Seth?
Yeah, well, definitely, and Kens, it seemed like it was a return to form for him, surprisingly, in what is essentially his final race. He ran in the top 10 off and on throughout the entire night, ended up finishing 6th. You have Allmendinger and McMurray. They finished 18th and 19th. It's kind of sums up their career to a certain point. McMurray, he would win the big races, Daytona 500, Coke 600, Brickyard, but he never won anywhere else. He never ran well anywhere else. It was just the big races, the majors for him. Allmendinger, a lot of people like to stereotype him as the road course ringer, but he had good runs when he was with Penske at Martinsville, at Bristol, at Kansas. He had good runs at times with James Finch and an underfunded car at tracks like Michigan. So for him, it's kind of a disappointment with where he ended up and where he is in his career. McMurray looks like he'll run the Daytona 500 for Ganassi next year. Allmendinger, he has some offers in IMSA. You also have Kenseth, who has an offer to take a leadership role in the company at Roush. And somebody else, which he didn't mention, Regan Smith, the super sub of the Cup Series. This was likely, for now, his last race. He's still subbing for Casey Kane, who had to step away because of health issues. His weekend was just atrocious, to say the least. They had an oil leak during the parade laps, ended up losing 26 laps, and they were never able to recover. He earned his first career last place finish, and it was Levine Family Racing's last race with Chevrolet. They're moving on to Toyota next year, bringing in Matt DiBenedetto. So it was just an embarrassing race for them.
Well, it happens from time to time. Things like that happen. And, back touching on AJ. AJ's still relatively young. I don't think we've seen the last of AJ Allmendinger in a Cup car. I think he'll surface down the road somewhere. He could even probably end up back in IndyCar.
There's a lot of folks in IndyCar that would love to see AJ back in there. I just don't know that there's a seat for him right now.
Or if he wants to go there, because
if he wants to, yeah. I mean, he's after the Justin Wilson incident. He kind of said, until they close the cockpit. But I don't know if the windscreen they're testing may change his mind or not. I don't know. But the guy was pretty solid in IndyCar. I remember him, back in the Champ Car days, winning. I think he had a little 3 in a row or 2 in a row stretch back in the day, many years ago. And when he had his little exile from NASCAR, Roger put him in the 500. When he failed the drug test, and he did, he held himself up well there. So, but we'll just see what the future holds for AJ. So, but I do want to talk about NASCAR crowned 2 other champions this week, other than Joey. So Seth, let's talk about first Tyler Reddick.
Tyler Reddick, he was the underdog for the Xfinity Series, and basically the Xfinity Series, it was a green flag race. The only cautions were for the end of the stages, and it was Cole Custer's race to lose. Cole Custer dominated this race last year. He was dominating this race this year. Between last year and this year, Cole Custer has led 300 of the last 400 laps at Homestead in the Xfinity Series, which is just a mind-boggling stat alone. But he was out front in the final stage, came down to pit strategy. Reddick was the second one on pit road, right behind Christopher Bell. Cole Custer and his team, they decided to wait out for a caution. I don't know what they were thinking after a handful of laps, because it was clear that there was none coming. And by the time he got back on track, it was a race between Reddick and Bell. And Bell ultimately ended up with a flat right rear tire, had to come to pit road. Cole Custer was able to climb from about 12th all the way up to 2nd, but he just did not have enough time to catch Reddick. And it's like you were saying about drivers needing a little bit more seasoning. Stewart-Haas Racing has said that they're keeping Cole Custer in the Xfinity Series for a 3rd season to give him that extra seasoning. And just a little preview to next year already, Tony Stewart post-race, because they won the Owners' Championship. It was the only split championship among the 3 series this year. Tony Stewart confirmed that they will have a second car full-time next year in the Xfinity Series. He didn't mention a driver, but all signs point to Chase Briscoe.
Yeah, Chase Briscoe is a favorite of Ford. So yeah, and after his win at the Roval in in Charlotte, and then he's been kind of Ford's go-to guy in some of the other series that they're involved in too, and they've put Chase in various rides. I'm sure that Ford probably had a lot to do with underwriting that, and that's good for the Xfinity series in that word came down last week that more than likely Roush is going to shutter his Xfinity operation, the 16 and the 60.
They did confirm they're shutting the 60 down.
Right, and the 16 is going to go if they can't secure sponsorship. So, we could see a net loss of one competitive car in that series with if that comes to fruition there. So that'll be good. And then too, Tyler Reddick is going to move over to RCR. He's going to take the spot that Daniel Hemrick is moving up into the Cup 31 car. And of course, Daniel Hemrick finished third in the Xfinity Championship.
That he did, and Hemrick unfortunately was kind of out to lunch the entire race. It seemed like it was a race between Reddick, Custer, and Bell. Hemrick never got up to the lead. He never got into the lead of the championship 4 in that series. Even John Hunter Nemechek, who was also running the 42 car for the Owners' Championship, because in the Owners' playoff, the 42 was in, not the 9. And it was just disappointing for Hemrick.
Yeah. For a while there, it seemed like the 42 may be the spoiler in the Xfinity race, because he ran in the top 5 most of the night. So, it was a little bit disappointing for the 21 car, Hemrick's 21 car. They really never had the speed to contend with the with Bell and the 00. So.
And just
Reddick, for that matter.
And just a couple notes on Reddick. He's the first driver in the Xfinity Series history to win only the first race of the season and the last race of the season. And he's also the first one just to accomplish that feat alone. And just an interesting note about Junior Motorsports, their 3 drivers' championships have all come with the rookies driving the number 9 car. Chase Elliott in 2014, William Byron last year, and Tyler Reddick this year.
How about that? And it always seems they win the championship and then they move on.
Now, speaking of winning the championship and not moving on, let's talk about Brett Moffitt, man. He's this guy, he drives for Shigeaki Hattori, and the team has been plagued with, financial problems on and off. That they put all the naysayers down. Moffitt wins the title, but no solid plans for next year.
For Moffitt, anyway.
Yeah. What about Hattori Racing?
There's talk of a couple different drivers, each that have funding, and the way it's been made out to me, we might see someone who recently ran in the ARCA series full time run the 16 next year. Otherwise, Brett Moffitt dominated that race. It was essentially between Moffitt and Noah Gragson. Justin Haley was up there at times. Johnny Sauter, for whatever reason, the last 3 weeks since he last won at Martinsville, the last 3 weeks, his team has been out to lunch, and that's so unlike GMS racing in general. It was weird to see Sauter have issues constantly. Haley also, he wasn't as much out to lunch, but he just never had the same speed that the 2 Toyotas had, which granted, they were all running the NT1 spec engine. The only truck in the field that was not running a spec engine was Matt Crafton, and they were running the Ford OEM engine.
Okay, so but nothing solid for the champion for next year, huh?
Nothing as of yet. He doesn't have a full-time sponsor. Shiggy, he has about 8 to 10 races with Eisen Group. he has about another 2 to 3 races with the various Toyota car dealerships over in Japan. Otherwise, the rest of the sponsorship, like I alluded to, is going to be coming from that other driver.
Yeah, so he's looking for a pay-to-play driver. Yeah, it's kind of fun. Shiggy, he's well known in IndyCar circles as the one driver to have his kart license suspended because he was so bad as a driver. But good to see him doing well as a team owner. And congratulate that team because they have had a tough go of it this season, and they really stuck with it. And for them to bring this thing home was pretty incredible.
Yeah, there were a couple races this season. Iowa comes to mind where up to a week, if not less, beforehand, they didn't have sponsorship to go and race, and they were considering skipping races. Iowa, Brett Moffitt's father, his company, sponsored the truck, and he went out and won that race. Talladega, they had a sponsor lined up until 2 days before the race, and then the sponsor pulled out. And at that point, they were committed at running. They were already in the playoffs, so they put the American Red Cross on the truck and donated the winnings to the American Red Cross.
Fantastic, yeah. So, but now, as long as we're talking about trucks and Xfinity, and we talked about guys who are wrapping up their careers, we would be remiss if we did not mention Elliott Sadler, who's had a nice long career. Guy out of Virginia. I was living in Virginia when when his older brother Hermie was touted as maybe the next big thing in NASCAR. Then Elliott came along and proved to be even better. But Elliott Sadler wrapping up a nice career, wanting to spend more time with the family. Couldn't quite get into that Final Four and get it done, but kind of an end of an era there too. Now, Gray, you've probably dealt with Elliott Sadler on and off.
Elliott comes from Emporia, Virginia, which is about 12 miles from where I grew up in the northern part of North Carolina. So yeah, I've known the Sadler family for a long time. His family was well involved when I was a kid in local racing in northeastern North Carolina and southeastern Virginia. They sponsored. In fact, they fielded. His dad fielded late model cars back when I was a kid at our local track. So yeah, Sadlers have been involved in racing a long time. Elliott has had a great career. He's won in all 3 major series, and that in itself is quite an achievement. He'll join a list of a rather exclusive list of drivers that have done that.
About 30.
Yeah, about 30, but still a good list to be on in having won in all 3 major NASCAR touring series. So yeah, good career for Elliott. He's the good thing about it, he's retiring on his own terms, and which is always good. He's going out, wants to do some other stuff. I don't think we've probably seen the last of Elliott as far as being around the racetrack. I think we'll see him do a little bit of media work down the road too, I would imagine.
And Elliott did actually tweet out. Granted, he deleted the tweet because apparently he let the news out a little too soon, but he was getting fitted for a seat to run a late model race at Myrtle Beach, and he was also talking about that his teammate in that race, his Junior Motorsports team owner, Dale Jr.
Yep, the North-South race down at Myrtle Beach. I saw that. Yep.
I saw that too. So now let's tie up the NASCAR season with a bow, and let's talk about this. The Macau Grand Prix. It's one of the most dangerous, tightest street circuits in the world. There was a pretty crazy accident there that happened at about 3 a.m. our time. I was actually I was wide awake because I had worked the night shift and I got a little messenger on my message from our friend Krista Hardy. He says, "Wow, did you see that?" I said, "No, I didn't. So I had to look it up." But Sophia Florsch car left the track. It looked like it was launched out of a cannon straight through the catch fencing and into the bunker that's there for the photographers. Miraculously, she survived. She has a spinal injury. She underwent surgery today. The outlook is rather optimistic that she won't face paralysis. But now, Richard, you follow Formula 3 and European racing quite a bit. Man, what are your thoughts on this? This was just, it's absolutely unreal to watch.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, Macau is a dangerous race, period. Recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, I think of a couple of previous fatal accidents, unfortunately. One because they have 3 races there the weekend. They have a touring car race, the Formula 3, and they also have a bike race. And I think a couple of years ago, one of the bike riders was killed, and a few years before that, in actually a relatively innocuous accident, one of the touring car drivers was killed. So it is a dangerous circuit. It's almost, I guess, a little bit like the circuit they have out in Azerbaijan. A lot of very twisty twisty sections, and then a couple of really long high-speed drags, on the shoreline there in Macau. I mean, I was in a similar position. I wasn't watching the race, but then I did catch the highlights of it and saw the accident. And as you say, it was a horrific accident. And for her to be even coming out of it alive, never mind what would appear to be with relatively minor injuries. I think the thing that has saved her ultimately is the photographer's stand that she hit. There was a sort of an aperture in there. Sorry, no pun intended there about the camera.
That's good as that. Pretty funny.
That was pretty good, wasn't it? I mean, I wish I had thought of that one because that was quite impressive. No, there was an opening in the photographer's stand for the lenses and everything, and without being 100%, it looks like her head has actually gone into that gap, and that is what has ultimately saved her life.
And just something that I was reading. They added that stand this year. It was originally just a scaffolding last year in that corner.
Yeah. I mean, goodness me, you'd dread to think what would have happened if that hadn't been there. I mean, she could have ended up in literally somebody's front room.
Yeah, well, I mean, can you imagine if there was a grandstand right there?
Oh,
and you're talking, Le Mans 1955. That would have been horrific.
She was clocked at going 276.2 kilometers per hour when she hit the stand. That equates to about 171 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Looking back all the way, you have to go back to a different camera angle to see what even caused it. Contact with another car, severed the brake line. She spun backward into the wall and slid along it. Hit one of the sausage curbs, which is also new this year, which launched her up into the roll hoop and the helmet of another driver who, thank God he's okay too. Granted, he had some back pain issues, but that could have been a lot worse. And that's what launched her up and over the catch fencing.
I mean, I think what it does, in a way, show from a technical standpoint, I guess, if you want to put it that way, how effective the braking systems on these cars are. You've gone, in the space of probably 200 yards, from when she would have been applying the brakes. She had basically no retardation whatsoever. And, it shows just how effective they are when they do brake. You compare the speed a car would be going, without stopping. I mean, they'd obviously, she'd have scrubbed a little bit of speed, but relatively little. It's pretty scary. And it does show just how impressive the braking ability of even a Formula 3 car. I mean, goodness me, never mind a Formula 1 car.
And something that we would all be remiss if we didn't mention, 2 photographers and a corner marshal were also injured in the wreck, or in the incident. And the 2 photographers, one is scheduled to be released from the hospital in about 2 or 3 days. He suffered a broken jaw, some facial, essentially scratches and scarring, and the other photographer suffered a lacerated liver. He's going to be in the hospital for, I think it said 2 weeks. The Marshall, he had some abdominal injuries. I'm not entirely sure exactly what his injuries were. Sophia, she underwent a 11-hour surgery that was deemed successful, and as Frank said, there's little to no concern about paralysis, and she's even tweeted out since then, vowing to return to the race car.
Can you imagine being one of those photographers sitting in that little bunker? There's no place to go, and the car is coming right at you.
I doubt you didn't see it.
That's got to be hard. Yeah, I mean, it's like but again, 20 years ago, I mean, you remember when guys used to get launched out of the track in Monaco and land in the harbor?
Yeah, that crash was, that was just by the grace of God go I. I mean,
Exactly, yeah.
That was, you wouldn't have had time to react if you'd have been standing right in the path of it. You would have, it'd have been all over.
And just one more note. Granted, it was a temporary building, but it was anchored in place, God forbid anything. The impact broke the foundation.
Oh, I mean, it was immense. It highlights the energy that these cars have and what goes, the power that they can generate. It's, unfortunately, you only sometimes really, when you actually look at these cars, driving around the circuit, and cup cars are a prime example of it. They look relatively slow. It's just when you compare them to a stationary object, especially when they hit one,
and
that you realize quite how much power there is involved in there.
Especially when they leave the ground and get in the air, and there's nothing, that you don't have you don't have the scrub of the tires on the asphalt or whatnot to slow them down. I mean, they're literally become like airplanes. Then they're just, they're just flying through the air at what, I forget what speed they estimated that called, 264 kilometers.
276.
276
170 miles an hour, roughly, wasn't it?
Wow, yeah. And nothing to scrub speed off,
No.
And something that I do also want to mention, the broadcast cut away from it and didn't really show the severity of the impact. The only way we've been able to see it is essentially the fans and their cell phone cameras, or even some of the amateur photographers with their video cameras. Somebody put a compilation of all the different angles, just showing the severity and putting it into perspective. I retweeted it out earlier in the week, so if anybody wants to catch that, my handle is Motorsport Rev. Just go and check it out. It's insane how quickly that car went into that bunker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah. So, on a related note, speaking of drivers with spinal injuries, Robert Wickens tweeted out some news today, or earlier this week rather, where he's actually taking some steps on a gait machine. So his road to recovery, while slow, is progressing. So we hope to see Robert Wickens back in a race car again, and but he's still estimating at least 24 months, until then. Marcus Ericsson will be in the car, or I don't know if he'll be there for the full 2 years, but Wickens has been active on social media, letting folks know the updates on his recovery. He seems to be in really good spirits, and we wish him well, and we also wish Sophia Florsch well in her recovery. She had tweeted out that her surgery went well today. So, but before we finish up for the night, Formula One has one more race to go at Yas Marina. Nothing to be decided there, but it's going to be the final race for Kimi Räikkönen in the Ferrari, the final race for Fernando Alonso in Formula One, unless he changes his mind. And, last race of the season. So, Richard, what might we expect to see at Yas Marina next weekend, or this coming weekend, rather?
I think you're going to see something that resembles paint drying. It's never a particularly good race out there. It's the typical Tilke track. It's terrible. You get the odd good battle every now and again, but everybody's going to be wanting to go home. Probably the most of the attention, the most interesting thing is going to be the test the following week they have out there. But no, it's going to be a little bit of a non-event, I fear. These sort of dead rubber races, if you like, towards the end of the season. Brazil was pretty entertaining, but Brazil's a far better track to have a race like that at than Abu Dhabi. Obviously there's going to be, probably in a way for Alonso it helps a little bit that they don't have, the title isn't going to be there, and he can get a little bit more of the limelight. I'm sure for his final race, but there's going to be a lot of posturing, I think, and I think people are just wanting to get the season over and done with and look forward to next year.
Do you feel like Formula One season is too long at 20 races?
I don't think it's too long. I just think that it's just an unfortunate set of circumstances. I mean, if there was 1 point in it between two guys, who would be talking about this race as being fantastic? I think that it's just unfortunate in a way that Ferrari sort of dropped the ball a little bit in the second half of the season there. I think you could have as many races as you like if the racing's tight and teams are pushing each other.
Yeah, it just seems like it's been a number of years since. What was the last time we had a Formula One championship go down to the last race? It's been a bit, right?
It was when Rosberg beat. It was when Rosberg beat Hamilton. That was the last race of the season.
Oh, so that was 2 years ago, yeah. But before that, it was 2007 with Kimi and
Vettel won his first championship at the last race of the season when Alonso couldn't get past Petrov. So there's been a couple there, but yeah, you're right. It's not been. I don't think Vettel won any other. I think he only won one championship at the last race of the season. I may be wrong there, but on the whole,
the last really exciting one, for me was 2007 with Kimi, where you'd really. Kimi came out of nowhere. He was the third place guy,
Yeah, I mean, well, even Vettel was, Vettel when he won his championship, I don't think he was leading because Alonso had to finish like 4th or 5th or something to get the championship and ended up with finishing 7th. So, that was a pretty tight event. It was just, again, I mean, if that final race had been at a Brazil or a Spa or somewhere like that, or a Silverstone, I'm sure Alonso would have got past Petrov. It was just that it was at this point and squirt track like Abu Dhabi that it just didn't work. That killed the championship in many ways, and it's a shame. I know why they go there for the final race of the season. It's all the money from the companies and sponsors that want to be out in Abu Dhabi, but. As a track and as an event, it's pretty much of a non-event, really.
Yeah, they say the same thing about IndyCar with the season ender at Sonoma. They like to call it Snornoma. Yeah. But at least we've had the title race go down to the title fight go down to the last race. So, but anyway, so Lewis Hamilton is joining rare company. Finishing up this season. I mean, his win total has him. Is he 3rd all time now?
He must be getting up there. Yeah. I mean, I think he's won. Has he won like half? Yeah, he's won half of the races under the hybrid turbo era. I mean, that's pretty impressive. You got to give the guy credit.
You certainly do. Yeah. So
you look at it's interesting in a way. You contrast Alonso and Hamilton. Hamilton made that move from McLaren to Mercedes and everybody criticised him. And look what happened. Alonso seems to have made all the big moves, to Ferrari, to Mercedes, to McLaren when he was at Renault, then to Ferrari, then back to Mercedes. All these big money moves that everybody say, this is going to be the resurgence of that team. And it's always gone the wrong way. So it's interesting to compare and contrast those. I mean, some people would argue that Alonso is potentially the more naturally gifted driver than Hamilton. But he's just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. So it's it's interesting to do that comparison between those two guys.
Absolutely, yeah. And I just wonder what Alonso has on his plate for next year, other than the Indy 500. But
Yeah, I
there's
think they'll
some
be wrapping
speculation.
up-
They said he's got a full plate of racing scheduled for next year. So I'm sure he's doing WEC, but I
Yeah.
don't know what else he's going to jump into. You know, he's doing the little NASCAR swap thing. I don't think we'll see him in a cup race. And maybe he'll do the Indy Grand Prix as well as the 500. I don't know. It's whatever McLaren wants to do. But they say he's got a full slate of racing for next year, but we don't know what.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see that whole. Where are they doing the swap? Is it Bahrain that they're driving when they do the swap? I can't remember now. It's not Abu Dhabi. I know that much.
Seth, you know that?
They're doing it, I believe, the day after, actually.
In Abu Dhabi, because I know
Yeah.
so the race is Sunday, and then I think Tuesday, Wednesday is the tyre test or young driver test. So maybe they're doing it in between there then.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think they're doing it on the Monday in between.
Okay. So I mean, that'll obviously, that'll obviously be a road course car that Hendrick are sending over for him to jump in. I guess that means that actually
It's tough
Alonso.
enough for the F1 cars to get around. I can't imagine with a
Yeah.
NASCAR car.
I wonder how
It's
they get
gonna be
out. I
like
wonder
to
if
get
we
around
can
there, yeah.
actually get it out pit lane, and they'll probably use the secondary because Abu Dhabi's got 2 pit lanes, so they'll probably use the secondary one. But I guess that'll mean technically that Alonso will actually be the last guy to drive a Hendrick car with a Lowe's livery on it.
Wow.
There's a bit of trivia. In 20 years' time, there's a bit of trivia for you, Seth. You can drag that. You can pull that out. You don't have to give me any royalties for that one.
All right, guys, we're up against the clock here. We just got a few minutes left. Next week will be our season-ending show. We'll recap the paint drying from Yas Marina, and then we'll have a 2-hour show where we recap all of the 2018 season and bring up all of our favorite stories. We'll have a couple of special guests as well. But until then, you guys each have a few moments apiece for one final thought, because heck, we don't need to pick a winner unless you want to pick a winner for Abu Dhabi, unless you just want to say Hamilton. So, Gray, final thought for the night?
Well, final thoughts. Pretty good, interesting race season all across the board in all 3 series that we cover. Had its up like every other season. It has its ups and downs and things during the middle of the season. But I thought very, very interesting at times in all 3 series. We had some good stories and some good things to talk about. And a few tragic things go during the season. But all in all, another good season in the books, and look forward to doing it all again next year.
All right. And Seth, one final thought for the night?
Honestly, the same as what Gray said. It was just a very interesting season. I'm still interested to see exactly what's going to happen with the Fords switching over to the Mustang and the new aero package. While everyone thinks the big 3 is still going to be the big 3, or the big teams are still going to be the big teams, I think we'll have a little bit more variety, especially with Levine Family Racing switching and essentially taking Furniture Row Racing's place.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. And Richard, one final thought from you before we sign
Yeah,
off?
Obviously the Formula 1's still got 1 race to go, but from that standpoint, there's been glimpses of what everybody wants to see in Formula 1. There's been glimpses of close racing and glimpses of, Hamilton against, Verstappen and Vettel, and literally, turning on the race on Sunday morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and not knowing who's going to win. That's all you can ask for in Formula 1, and there's been glimpses of it this year, and we really hope that coming through into next year we can contain that momentum, and it is open to anybody's guess, really.
Yes, it is. It'll be nice if, because every time we thought that it could be anybody's race, Mercedes won.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
There was that spell in the middle of the season where there was 4 or 5 races in a row where the fastest car didn't win, but then after that, Mercedes got their act together, and I think Vettel won Silverstone when Hamilton had by far the fastest car. So it comes and goes, but you hope that they can get their act together, and it'll be a close season next year.
All right, well, we are just about out of time, so I want to thank you, Gray, Seth, and Richard. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank iHeartRadio. And I also want to thank Spotify, where you can find our show now. We'll have one more show this season. We'll talk to y'all next week. Good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.